Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda 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 Paramashivoham.
I bless you all. Let you all open all your three eyes and manifest the powers of Mahasadashiva.
Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham.
Nithyananda Hara Hara Bolo Hare Bhakta Manohara. Nithyananda Hara Hara Bolo Hare Bhakta Manohara. Tumko Nitya Nata Varalala, Tumko Nitya Dina Dayala, Tumko Nitya Nata Varalala, Tumko Nitya Dina Dayala. Nithyananda Ananta Nantana, Nithya Hara Hara Bole Hare Om. Nithya Hara Hara Bole Hare Om. Nithyananda Hara Hara Bolo Hare Bhakta Manohara.
Bhakta Manohara, Nithya Manohara.
दयाल हरि परम दयाला,
दीन दयाल हरि परम दयाला,
नित्य रमण हरि गोविन्द गोपाल
नित्य रमण हरि गोविन्द गोपाल
दीनदयाल हरि परम दयाल नित्य रमण हरि गोविन्द गोपाल
नित्य रमण हरि गोविन्द गोपाल हरे नित्यानंद नारायण ओम हरे नित्यानंद नारायण ओम
नित्यानंद अनंत नंदन नित्य हर हर बोले हरे ओम नित्य हर हर बोले हरे ओम नित्यानंद हर हर बोलो हरे भक्त मनोहरा
भक्त मनोहरा नित्य मनोहरा
नित्यानंद हर हर बोलो हरे भक्त मनोहरा
भक्त मनोहरा नित्य मनोहरा
जय गुरुनाथ नित्य गुरुनाथ
जय गुरुनाथ नित्य गुरुनाथ
नित्य पुरीश हर परमेश
नित्य पुरीश हरे परमेश
जय गुरुनाथ नित्य गुरुनाथ नित्य पुरीश हर परमेश
नित्य पुरीश हरे परमेश हरे नित्यानंद नारायण ओम हरे नित्यानंद नारायण ओम
नित्यानंद अनंत नंदन नित्य हर हर बोले हरे ओम
नित्यानंद बोलो हरे नारायण गोपाल हर हर बोलो हरे नित्यानंद गोपाल हर हर बोलो हरे नित्यानंद गोपाल
On the night of April 16th after 10 p.m., two Mahants of Juna Akara were chased in circles and bludgeoned to death with tree branches after being released to a waiting mob by police officers. The mass media cult tried to sweep this murder of Hindu leaders under the rug by withholding the identity of the murder victims and painting them as thieves caught in a case of mistaken identity. However, facts of the case have since come to light through video recordings of the murders reaching social media circles, and it tells a very different story. For one, reports from locals of the Palghar murder area describe that police in fact stopped the vehicle carrying the two Mahants and sat them in the middle of the road in the dark and began the questioning. It was at this time that a crowd was collected by spreading rumors that two child thieves and organ harvesters had been caught by police impersonating Hindu sadhus. Of course, none of these details were printed by any of the mass media cult. What would have happened, as is common in this technique of so-called mob lynching, the way to conduct a murder in public without getting caught, is that there would have been a small group of paid assassins standing by to ensure the job gets done. Then, a group of members from outside the area would also have been bussed in to add to the fervor. Next, a few locals are rabble-roused into heightening the fear atmosphere in the dark of night. Combined, this creates an atmosphere where the murders surely will take place. But amidst the chaos of locals and unknown rowdies, it will become unclear who actually dealt the death blow. And amidst the dark of night and 200 youth running around, a large handful of them can be arrested while still ensuring the exact paid assassins are never even questioned. This is quite a hard scenario for some to swallow who prefer to like TikToks and Instagram posts as news, no doubt. But do we really need any more evidence of the lengths to which the conspiring murderers of Hindu saints will go to successfully eliminate their targets? The list of examples of targeted Hindu leaders goes on and on and on. It is not slowing, except that the number of Hindu targets is dwindling. Even media is proving too bored to talk about it, and even common people simply tweet in anger and then move on to the next. But what will we ever do about it? Will we ever stand up for the peaceful solutions needed for humans? Is there a better science anywhere with proven solutions for all humanity? How will we justify the thousands of gurukuls, thousands of saints, and thousands of temples destroyed before our eyes now? And later lament, possibly to our children, that the strengths of Hindu lifestyle have been lost forever? Is it not the time to do something now, when a 35-year-old promising Mahant of Juna Akara is successfully eliminated in a video-recorded assassination, and the mass media cult tries to systematically avoid reporting on it? Do we need more evidence and more motivation, or a hope that the consumeristic lifestyle will somehow magically become fulfilling in the future? When we have eaten all the fish and polluted all their rivers, is it only then we will agree that money cannot be eaten and it's not giving fulfillment? We are facing the emergency decision now to protect and preserve the needed solutions of Hindu life and the spiritual lifestyles for all of humanity. Will we simply click like, swipe up, and scroll and watch Hinduism be bludgeoned to death until we finally all just get bored and stop noticing? Add your voice now to the growing need to dedicate to Dharma, the spiritual lifestyle and solution for all ailing humanity. Stand up for the solutions and make a dedicated difference starting now. Click sign up at facebook.com/apatsanyas.
Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om Nithyananda.
नित्यानन्दं परमसुखदं केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिं द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वदी साक्षिभूतं भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि. Our humble obeisance at the sacred lotus feet of our beloved Sadguru, the living incarnation of Paramashiva, His Divine Holiness, Bhagavan Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam. Nithyanandam, we welcome each and every one of you gathered from all over the world for today's Darshan and Nithyananda Satsang, the everyday morning discourse by Swamiji, His Divine Holiness, Bhagavan Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam, the living incarnation of Paramashiva. We have been continuing to hear Swamiji's discourse on truths related to the current situation we are first facing worldwide in the form of the COVID-19. And Swamiji has been delivering the Kailasa's recommendations and views, the Hindu solutions for life post-COVID-19. Before we move further into the segment, we request each of you to kindly share this live feed through which you are watching so that more and more people can connect and listen to these truths and listen to the truths directly from Swamiji while he's delivering it. It is very important because today we are understanding that the solutions for what we are facing in our individual lives and as a global community lies in the higher truths, the cosmic principles, which is exactly what Hindu Dharma is teaching, which is why it is called Hindu solutions. Because Hinduism is not a religion as we know it in the conventional sense. Hinduism is a science of enlightenment, and therefore it belongs to the entire global community. Its teachings are universal and in alignment with the cosmic principles. And the main cosmic principle, which is let us coexist, has been violated rather violently over the past hundreds of years, the culmination of which we are facing today in each of our individual lives as the disaster in the form of the COVID-19. It is just not a mere virus or a disease to do with the physical health condition. It is the outcome of the collective negativity, the collective abuse that we have done in violating the principle, the cosmic principle of let us coexist. And delivering the Hindu solutions for life post-COVID-19, Swamiji has so beautifully revealed the deep connection between the individual and global disasters we face and the violation of the cosmic principles that we have been doing. And he has been revealing to us, especially the cosmic principle of let us coexist and celebrate together, and the cosmic principle of non-violence, ahimsa, where human beings need to stop deluding themselves into thinking that we have a right over the other to kill. Planet Earth belongs to all creatures and beings, not just to the human race. And it is the Hindu incarnations and gurus who have been repeatedly giving us these Hindu solutions, which we have been ignoring for a long time. We have been persecuting the Hindu incarnations and gurus instead of receiving their truths. Today, globally, the solutions that are even being given for the COVID-19 virus is from the Hindu solutions, whether we realize it or not, starting from the advocating of yoga, which is one of the chief sciences of Sanatana Hindu Dharma. Thus, all the solutions that are being advocated today are from the Hindu solutions. Therefore, we need to wake up sooner rather than later that Hinduism is not a religion, but it is the very science of living together in high frequency of consciousness on the planet and experiencing life at a very high frequency. Therefore, it becomes very important to stop continued persecution against Hindu gurus and incarnations and start looking into our life, how to live it peacefully in alignment with the cosmic principles. The history of persecution of Hindu incarnations and gurus runs to thousands of years. In the very strong and powerful satsang that we heard from Bhagwan just 2 days ago, there was a very deeply painful but strong clarion call from him, explaining to us so clearly how for thousands of years the persecution, the Hindu Holocaust has been happening. And he was talking to us in the context of the most recent, the 5-day-old brutal murder of 2 Hindu sannyasis who belong to the Akhada Parishad Panch Dashnam Juna Akhada, and they were brutally lynched and beaten to death by the terrorist elements in Maharashtra's Palghar village. But the narratives in the mass media cult have already started saying that they were thieves who were beaten to death by the villagers. Neither were they thieves, nor those who beat them to death were villagers. They were Hindu sadhus who were only contributing to humanity with the Hindu truths and other socio-spiritual services, and not the people who beat them were villagers. They were people who were part of the planned death of these sadhus. They were employed people who were supposed to execute the assassination, the brutal murder of these sannyasis. It becomes very important to study the Hindu Holocaust, because the solutions of Hindu Dharma is what is going to help us today. And the Hindu Dharma solutions is the mother of various other, the truths of various other religions today. We are now going to take this time off to study and understand the Hindu Holocaust and its history, so that we will stop it and start experiencing the higher truths in our life. Joining us today in this segment are our sannyasis, Nithya Achalananda Swami, Nithya Jayananda, and Nithya Atmananda Swami. Before that, let us watch that very powerful satsang we heard from Bhagwan just 2 days ago, explaining to us for our own good, for the good of humanity, what will happen if we continue the persecution against the Hindu gurus and incarnations who have always come and are coming and are here today with us to save humanity.
Today I want to bring the attention of the whole world to this continuous Hindu Holocaust happening in India and many countries, especially in India. Understand? First thing, I wanted to put this on record. I strongly condemn mob lynching of 2 my own sampradaya. Sadhus belong to Akhada Parishad Panch Dasnam Juna Akhada sadhus, and the assistant driver of those sadhus. All 3 brutally lynched by terrorist mob in Maharashtra's Palghar. India's independence has no way made we sadhus safe. Hindu leaders, Hindu sadhus getting mob lynched, killed is 1,000-year-old regular happening, and India's independence has no way made us safe or stopped this continuous persecution. O Hindus all over the world, I beg you all with humbleness, please wake up to this truth. Please wake up to this reality. Please understand the next few points I am going to express. First thing, fortunately we got the video of the sadhus getting lynched and killed by the terrorist gang. If we did not get this video, by now media would have produced marked video of these sadhus raping some girl, and they would have created a either illegal affair or rapist story around these sadhus and justified their killing. I tell you, neither India's mass media cult nor India's entertainment industry is honest or basic moral, basic integrated to the truth. I tell you, the whole ecosystem created by the India's mass media cult and Indian entertainment industry, whether cinema or television, continuously projecting Hindu sadhus, Hindu leaders as negative role. Continuously Hindu sadhus and Hindu leaders and the Hindu way of dressing up is projected as villains, characterless, cheap comedians, so much of hate speech, directly, indirectly, subtly and brutally. The grand narrative, Hindu leaders and Hindu sadhus are anti-social, illegal, immoral, need to be eliminated as early as possible. The grand narrative is already built so strongly. Whether Tirubuvanam Ramalingam in Tamil Nadu or yesterday the sadhus killed in Palghar, Kalpavriksha Giriji Maharaj, Sushil Giriji Maharaj and their driver, all three were killed, brutally being beaten by the terrorist gang. But I tell you, I am telling you, O Hindus, we need to wake up to this. We need to bring attention of the whole world. All the human rights organizations all over the world should know what is being done to Hindu sadhus and Hindu leaders and Hindu thinkers. Outside India, constantly Hindus are projected as aggressors and terrorists by Indian media. Understand this dangerous ecosystem built in India by mass media cult and the entertainment industry. The funding, training and the whole ecosystem of mass media cult and entertainment industry, television, TV serials and cinema, the whole ecosystem is absolutely anti-Hindu. Look at any movie, villain, the negative characters will have Hindu symbols brightly established, presented on their bodies, but never heroes. Heroes will not have any symbol of Hinduism. If you see the percentage, less than 1% only heroes will be wearing Hindu symbols. 99% only villains will be having Hindu symbols. Constantly brainwashing the society. Hindu sadhus are criminals and worst. Grand narrative is built against Hindu sadhus and Hindu thinkers, Hindu leaders. If we did not get the video of Tirubhuvanam Ramalingam getting threatened and people forcing him to convert, move away from Hinduism. If we did not get that video, within few hours of his murder, Tamil Nadu media houses would have produced, morphed and produced some videos, either Tirubhuvanam Ramalingam having some illegal affairs or real estate problems or money issue, something they would have produced and changed the whole murder into some fight between two people and he got murdered. Maybe money issue, a real estate land issue or illegal affair issue. I am telling you, myself personally and my sannyasis, Nithyananda order, sannyasis, brahmacharis, devotees, we have faced this mob lynching for last 20 years and I know how painful it is and terrorizing. I am telling you, the ecosystem in India is such. Whether Tirubhuvanam Ramalingam murder or this yesterday two sadhus and one of his their assistants, driver, all three getting mob lynched, killed brutally. None of these murders neither the world will remember nor there will be any justice. Nobody will be convicted. That is the way things happen, I tell you. Or two minimum. I am collecting the statistics, data, analyzing. Literally 99.9% will go scot-free. The whole ecosystem is such. I tell you, unless we Hindus wake up to this truth and get the international attention, politicians will have their own priorities. Even politicians are not going to attend to you. Politicians will have their priorities. Hindus, wake up. Politicians are not going to attend to you unless you get the international attention. to this continuous Hindu Holocaust.
On the night of April 16th after 10 p.m., two Mahants of Juna Akara were chased in circles and bludgeoned to death with tree branches after being released to a waiting mob by police officers. The mass media cult tried to sweep this murder of Hindu leaders under the rug by withholding the identity of the murder victims and painting them as thieves caught in a case of mistaken identity. However, facts of the case have since come to light through video recordings of the murders reaching social media circles, and it tells a very different story. For one, reports from locals of the Palghar murder area describe that police in fact stopped the vehicle carrying the two Mahants and sat them in the middle of the road in the dark and began the questioning. It was at this time that a crowd was collected by spreading rumors that two child thieves and organ harvesters had been caught by police impersonating Hindu sadhus. Of course, none of these details were printed by any of the mass media cult. What would have happened, as is common in this technique of so-called mob lynching, the way to conduct a murder in public without getting caught, is that there would have been a small group of paid assassins standing by to ensure the job gets done. Then, a group of members from outside the area would also have been bussed in to add to the fervor. Next, a few locals are rabble-roused into heightening the fear atmosphere in the dark of night. Combined, this creates an atmosphere where the murders surely will take place. But amidst the chaos of locals and unknown rowdies, it will become unclear who actually dealt the death blow. And amidst the dark of night and 200 youth running around, a large handful of them can be arrested while still ensuring the exact paid assassins are never even questioned. This is quite a hard scenario for some to swallow who prefer to like TikToks and Instagram posts as news, no doubt. But do we really need any more evidence of the lengths to which the conspiring murderers of Hindu saints will go to successfully eliminate their targets? The list of examples of targeted Hindu leaders goes on and on and on. It is not slowing, except that the number of Hindu targets is dwindling. Even media is proving too bored to talk about it, and even common people simply tweet in anger and then move on to the next. But what will we ever do about it? Will we ever stand up for the peaceful solutions needed for humans? Is there a better science anywhere with proven solutions for all humanity? How will we justify the thousands of gurukuls, thousands of saints, and thousands of temples destroyed before our eyes now, and later lament possibly to our children, that the strengths of Hindu lifestyle have been lost forever? Is it not the time to do something now when a 35-year-old promising Mahant of Juna Akara is successfully eliminated in a video recorded assassination? And the mass media cult tries to systematically avoid reporting on it? Do we need more evidence and more motivation, or a hope that the consumeristic lifestyle will somehow magically become fulfilling in the future? When we have eaten all the fish and polluted all their rivers, is it only then we will agree that money cannot be eaten and it's not giving fulfillment? We are facing the emergency decision now to protect and preserve the needed solutions of Hindu life and the spiritual lifestyles for all of humanity. Will we simply click like, swipe up, and scroll and watch Hinduism be bludgeoned to death until we finally all just get bored and stop noticing? Add your voice now to the growing need to dedicate to Dharma, the spiritual lifestyle and solution for all ailing humanity. Stand up for the solutions and make a dedicated difference starting now. Click sign up at facebook.com/apatsanyas.
It can't get clearer than what we just saw. That powerful satsang, the clarion call, which we heard from Bhagwan, and the news item that we just saw in front of us, the brutal beating and killing, murder of the two sadhus. The narratives are already saying they were thieves beaten to death by villagers. Whereas, just because we have the actual videos with us today, when the whole murder actually happened, we're even able to juxtapose the two and explain to everyone exactly what happened. Otherwise, this will just go down silently in the annals of the Hindu Holocaust history, and people will never get to know the truths behind this. So it is not just history of Hindu Holocaust, it is what is happening today. This incident happened just 5 days ago on the 16th of April. So it becomes very relevant to each one of us today, that it is very much part of our life today. And if we don't stop the persecution of Hindu gurus and incarnations, we are going to continue to face the consequences in terms of some disaster or pandemic or the other. Therefore, we will now give a brief overview of the Hindu Holocaust and understand how this whole science of persecution has been working and how it has been repeating, but we have been blissfully oblivious to it. We have neither been exposed to it, and therefore we have never understood it. We only know what is being reported. And what is being reported is never what it is. I now invite Nithya Nithyananda Swami, our sannyasi, to start explaining the history of Hindu Holocaust for the best understanding of the viewers. Nithyanandamma.
Nithyanandam. The Hindu Holocaust is something that's been happening over the years, over the decades, over the centuries. It's something that I think the most concerning, the most probably unique aspect of this Hindu Holocaust, the Hindu persecution, is the fact that every other community, every other civilization over the ages has been able to share with the world what they have been going through if they have gone through. For example, in modern history, the word Holocaust itself was coined after the Jewish Holocaust, right? The Jewish persecution. 6 million Jews died. Literally, almost the whole world knows. There is a museum even right in Washington, D.C., that community has been able to share with the world what they have gone through, what has been done to them. Unfortunately, for Hindus, it is not even a one-time occurrence like for the Jews. It has been consistently happening across so many thousands of years. But honestly, I don't know whether, Hindus do not perceive the gravity of the situation, whether we just got used to being treated like this, or whether we have got such a distorted, perverted view of ahimsa or non-violence, or we underestimate or probably don't even value the power of sharing what is being done to us with the rest of humanity, forgetting the very fact that we are all part of the same planet. Like Bhagavan has been saying, it is not that bad happens, evil happens because the bad people do bad. It is because the good people do not do the good. As far as Hinduism goes, it's so true. If there are anti-Hindu forces, terrorist forces attacking us, whose responsibility it is to make sure that Hinduism as a religion, the Hindu civilization, the Vedic civilization, Paramashiva's teachings are protected? Obviously not of the non-Hindus. So obviously not of the anti-Hindus. They are doing what they believe in, which is attacking Hinduism, attacking anything which is liberating humanity. But why are Hindus not active, not even cognizant about what we're being subjected to? Even though we have the most ultimate science delivered to us across generations, right from Paramashiva himself, a living lineage, to the extent that the avatar himself takes on the responsibility of keeping the science alive. Paramashiva himself takes the responsibility of holding on the tip of his Trishul even during Pralaya. Varanasi, the teachings, everything. Yet, why is it that we are into this maya of non-activism, giving justifications ranging from an Advaitic Vedantic philosophy, which does not believe in karma yoga, to something as raw as just not interested in, it's not my job, it is somebody else's job? Whatever it may be, the price is being paid by every single one of us. The price has been paid by our ancestors. We continue to pay the price. And if we do not wake up, generations to come will not just pay the price, there won't exist Hinduism to even defend and pay the price for. Why so? To what extent can this Holocaust go? Let us take a brief look at what has happened across the centuries, dating back from today to 2000 years back. Let's take a look at what we have been subjected to. Does it not deserve to be told to the world? Does it not deserve internalizing by us as to how this happened, how it can be prevented? What is it that was missing that made us have to go through this not once, twice, repeatedly over a span of almost 1500 years? Let us take a look dating back to history. Here I am on the first slide. As you can see, first thing that we need to understand is what is Hinduism's uniqueness, significance? What is it that Paramashiva really made this whole existence, this one-to-many manifestation for, and how that applies to us in our day-to-day life, in our Charyapada, in our lifestyle. Hinduism has 5 pillars, broadly. Temples, which is really the home of this whole lifestyle. It is not just where the deities exist as living archavataras, living energies, with the prana pratishtha done by a living incarnation, and which preserve the energy for thousands of years, radiate that energy till the next avatar happens. Gurukuls, our learning centers, not just schools like modern schools, which either do just rote learning or just teach us to harness the power of the mind, which is just one minuscule aspect of human capability. But Gurukul exists to have that, literally that transmission, both through words and through communion, from the Guru to the disciple, to the Shishya. And the Guru makes the disciple literally flower uniquely and experience his or her peak potential, which is not capped by what he or she believes in, but which is literally experiencing the ultimate for every single being, experiencing and radiating his or her realization of Paramashivatva. The third, libraries, Jnanalayas, which are home to this entire knowledge, which are the repositories of this whole knowledge, which has come down to us from Paramashiva through, in the form of the Veda Agamas, and so many of the commentaries and the scriptures which are based on them, which has been transmitted down the ages through the rishis, munis, which has been preserved in various forms, be it palm leaves or in today's modern world in the form of books and even electronic media, digital storage. These are literally the notes. So when the living avatar happens, these notes become alive, in the sense of the avatar breathes life into these notes and makes what is explained in them to be a living lifestyle for every single person. The fourth, Goshalas, the home to the sacred cow. As we know, Hinduism considers the cow as a very sacred being, literally home to thousands of deities in her very own body. Every product of the cow is sacred and is used to have a healthy body and a non-violent lifestyle, because when the cow's muscle memory is such that when we take care of the cow, the very touch is healing. That touch of the cow on our skin, on our muscle memory, transmits that same non-violence into us. And then the fifth pillar, being Annalaya, free food, is the cornerstone of Hinduism. Just like free knowledge, free food is a very important aspect of Hinduism, where, as our Upanishads declare, grow a lot and share a lot. And food is literally considered God. So broadly, these 5 pillars support Hinduism to exist down the ages. If these 5 pillars are kept alive in the way they were meant to be, as they were created, as they were envisioned, that is all that is needed to keep this science of enlightenment and this enlightenment ecosystem alive. So down the ages, all the invaders, the intruders, the terrorists have targeted, literally, if you see, these 5 pillars. Across the ages, one and more than one pillar has been targeted and destroyed. So that, as we see in today's age, we've come to a point where we neither understand the value of Hinduism, of the Vedic civilization, nor, and when we don't understand the value, we obviously are not even cognizing that we are in a burning need for revival of this Hinduism, else the very planet's existence is at stake. It is not just a religion. It is literally survival need at this point in time. That need, that understanding has not even hit us, when actually the situation, the reality is such that it should be actually gut-wrenching to have to see what we saw in the last few days as to what is happening to the people who have dedicated their lives to living this Hindu lifestyle, the sadhus, the monks. As we said, these 5 pillars, literally the unique and probably the vulnerable aspect of these is that every single of these pillars needs us to pour our life energy into keeping them alive. Whether it is huge stone temples which need the whole civilization, whether it is a country or a city, the whole population needs to understand the significance of it and therefore pour their time, energy, money, life into building that structure, preserving that structure, keeping it alive, as in making that Vedic lifestyle alive daily in that, through performing the rituals, through engaging with people. So unless that is there, whether it is temples or whether you see Gurukul, unless the population over there, the people over there understand the value of the Gurukul system of education, there is no way in which it can be preserved just in the form of a building. It requires people to understand the value of life, the purpose of human life, which is, as Swamiji said, the first and the only priority of human existence is to realize Paramashivatva. But today, that is not even there as a cognition in mainstream society, be it Hindus or non-Hindus. The materialistic mindset has literally occupied us so much, to such an extent that, as Swamiji said, literally nature, cosmos, has to use a shastra like Corona as a shastra to make people realize we have done too much damage to Mother Earth, too much damage in our lives, to our consciousness, to the very fabric of society. More than this, if it is allowed to go, we will really destroy this planet. Same way, if you see whether it is libraries, goshalas, everywhere it is actually the life that we pour in that keeps that pillar standing. It is not like some other ideologies or structures which can just be documented in some books or carved on some stone, because all those structures are dead. Whether a pyramid stands for as a monument to some emperor in Egypt has no relevance to the current population. But in Hinduism, every structure, every book, every scripture, every institution is based on life. Our temples are not some dead structures which, if you just build in stone and keep it, they will serve the purpose. Of course, the deities over there are living deities. They will radiate the energy, but to whom? It is important for the current population, for the current people of this generation to be able to use that, understand its value, and keep that ecosystem alive. So this is where, if any of these pillars is attacked in the form of the very understanding of what they are standing for, what those pillars exist for, if that understanding is either destroyed or corrupted, it is done. The pillar will not stand. That is exactly what is the modus operandi that was used for destroying Hinduism, phase by phase, pillar by pillar. If we just look back in our history, more than 500 million Hindus have been killed, massacred, raped. This number is important for us to understand because just juxtapose the Jewish Holocaust, which happened in this very century, the 20th century rather, sorry, not the 21st, hardly a century back, 6 million people massacred versus a whopping staggering 500 million, not just physically killed, their lives devastated, they massacred brutally, sometimes even led to literally be tortured for hours or days before they succumb to death. The women molested, raped. It's a destruction of a whole civilization and 500 million victims. But no documentation of any of this. Nothing comes in our history books. Nothing is spoken about on television. If at all, there is a small segment of the population that gets involved in social media, forms some groups, shares what has been done, with hardly any action element, so to speak, as to how to prevent this from continuing. Because the majority of the population does not even understand that it is still happening in our very lives and we are supporting it, not only passively, but many, many times actively. If you just look at how the world existed way back, from 3200 CE, 56 Hindu kingdoms existed. From the time of Devi Meenakshi, where the whole planet was literally living the Vedic lifestyle, even as recent as 3000 CE, 56 Hindu deshas, kingdoms existed. And if you look at just about 10 years back from today, even in 2000, as early as 2007, 13 years back, no Hindu nation existed on this planet. That is a huge, that speaks volumes actually about if we can keep quiet and not even understand what is being done to us. From 3000 CE to 2000, that's like 1700 years. There's something seriously wrong with us. Either we are in denial mode, or we feel there will be a higher force that will come to take care. Yes, it will come to take care, but only if we are ready to live and understand and be active about the lifestyle of the Hindus, of the Vedic civilization. Avatar cannot happen and do everything by himself because let us understand from very first principles. When does an avatar happen? How does an avatar happen? The avatar is actually the manifestation of the ultimate, of the cosmos, manifesting in the human form when there is a deep seeking. When there is a deep seeking from the beings, from human beings, the avatar, the ultimate, is forced to take the form, and out of his Paramashiva, out of his ultimate compassion and love, manifests in a human form to revive the whole enlightenment ecosystem. So that is a very premise for the avatar to happen. So we really cannot be sitting in our dream world thinking that we can be just sitting on our couches, not bother to think, look at, or do anything about the reality, and expect the reality to change on its own like a slideshow. Down the years, it's not that our ancestors have not fought for keeping the civilization alive. Maybe, but if in our history books we read, we are taught, if we are taught what our ancestors have sacrificed, what kind of tyaga they have done to keep this civilization alive. Probably that could be a huge incentive for us to also understand and make the decision to do the same tyaga today. Since our history books do not teach, because that itself is one of the weapons of destruction, where knowledge is destroyed so that people do not know their own history. When we are uprooted from our very own glorious past, we don't need any more weapon to destroy us externally, because the very perception, the very identity of ours is displaced, is destroyed. There is nothing more left to brainwash a person. If you see in the Hindu Holocaust, the phase 1, so to speak, from 500 CE to 1700, in those 1300 years, huge number of barbaric invasions have happened by non-Hindus, anti-Hindus, by literally uncivilized marauders. They destroyed this whole temple-based enlightenment ecosystem. Many communities, many kingdoms, practically irreversibly. But on the other hand, many kingdoms survived also. The Gurukul system survived, the education system. The Hindu lifestyle was lived by some communities. Even today, as we see, just like the Aboriginal tribes or the Red Indians, almost Hinduism in India also has been relegated almost to a minority community who are actually living it. Fear of practicing it openly, both because of ridicule, derision, and physical persecution, like our community. We, all of us, disciples and followers of Bhagavan Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam, what are we today? Branded as a cult? Actually, what are we? We actually belong to a minority community, the Adi Shaivite minority community. It has become a minority because the number of people practicing this Shaivite tradition, Adi Shaivite tradition, is not even 1% of the population that exists of so-called Hindus, who are born Hindus. Not to speak of the huge numbers that have been converted to other religions on the basis of force and not understanding. If we just take a closer look at what all has happened, what all has been done across the ages, it will give a very detailed, painful, and awakening insight into what is in store for us if we do not wake up now. It may not be the same kind of gross atrocities committed physically, but it will be the exact same effect, masked. The veneer will be a sophisticated persecution, as was done to Bhagavan and his disciples. The veneer will be sophisticated, but beneath the veneer will be much more gory, gross persecution physically than has happened across the ages. If you just take a look at the history of massacres, the history of slavery, the history of temple destruction, broadly as 3 different categories, if you take a closer look, as you see, from 1000 CE to about 500 years past, 1000 to 1500s, the huge number of massacres by the Mughal invaders, Islamist terrorists who invaded India all the way from north, practically all the way down south, killing a whopping 400 million Hindus. Just in those 500 years, from 1000 to 1500. 400, this is just numbers based on whatever is documented. It's unimaginable how much has gone undocumented. Just with the documented numbers, it is at 400 million. That's like more than 60 times the Jewish Holocaust numbers. Not just the Hindus getting killed, but if you see down the next category, which is slavery, literally from 1000 onwards, every Mughal invader has ensured that he enslaves millions of Hindus, be it Muhammad of Ghazni, 2 million Hindus enslaved just by him. This was the start of this whole literally destruction of our backbone, of our confidence on our culture, on our lifestyle, putting that huge fear psychosis by either killing or enslaving or by disrespecting, raping, molesting the women folk. 1388, the massacre by Timur. Again, 750,000 Hindus enslaved. These are all just individual invaders, individual Mughal invaders down the years. 1500s, 500,000, 1830. Now, even in the modern history, 1830, in just the Tirunelveli district, almost 300,000 Hindus enslaved. These are not just numbers to be looked at. This is really a big eye-opener for us to understand the volume and the extent of the destruction that can be caused by anti-Hindu elements is infinite. Actually, it is limitless. It is just to what extent a person or a group or maybe even a nation can go absolutely, literally animalistic or probably worse. There is no end to that violence. If we see down, as we know, Muhammad of Ghazni literally invaded India multiple times. 997, 2 million enslaved. Again, in 1001, 100,000 Hindus enslaved. All the way down south also, if you see Malabar, Wayanad, 1830s, 85,000 Hindus enslaved. In Kannada, in Karnataka, in 1830, 68,000 enslaved. If you add up all these numbers, besides the 500 million who were massacred, so many millions who have been enslaved. Over 3 million. That's a huge number which has been consistently subject to a destruction of their own personal identity, besides the destruction of their physical bodies by sheer murder. And then comes, in the same period, very cunningly, very strategically, destroying the very basis of not only our own civilization at that time, but also ensuring that the knowledge, the lifestyle, the very power is exterminated. That living lineage, destroying that by destroying our temples, our storehouses, literally our nuclear reactors of divine energy. They were targeted and destroyed right from 500 CE to 1800 CE, where a whopping 2,000 temples, and these are not obviously small structures like modern temples. They are huge structures in stone which have been built by our kings over hundreds of years, where generations of people, generations of the society have given their lives, the peak of their youth, to build these massive sacred structures. 2,000 temples destroyed and converted to mosques. And these mosques still exist. And many of these deities, our living deities, living energies, the Archavataras, have actually, even today, they lie buried under the stairs of these mosques. This is not some mythical story. It is actually from hardcore research. The reference is also there, where Sitaram Goyal's research shows some of these unimaginable atrocities and targeted persecution. Just in Bangladesh, 1992 to 1993, just in a year, 1,000 temples have been destroyed. That is modern history. It across the centuries, right up to today, this destruction of temples still continues, not only outside India, but even today inside India. The Goan Inquisition in 1500s, where the government, at that point, the Goa government implemented laws which even prevented the repairing of the temples. By 1569, practically all 100% of the temples in Goa were destroyed. And this is as per the archives of the Portuguese themselves, who were ruling Goa then. So if we see, even in modern history, after the Mughals came the British, amongst the major set of invaders who have invaded this Indian subcontinent. The British came, they started the second layer of sophisticated persecution, not open murder, killing, massacre like the Mughals did mercilessly. Some of the visuals that you're going to see, we warn you, are very gory, and it's a representation of what our ancestors have gone through, what kind of tyaga they have done to keep our civilization alive. When the British came, it was a lot more closer to what the modern day exists, how the modern day exists. So open war crimes were not permitted. So then it was a very, very sinister destruction of the next layer, which is created famines, riots, created riots, literally genocides inflicted on the population. In 1950, the riots of Bengal, for example, 500,000 killed, but a whopping 4.5 million were displaced. Let us understand how that impacts us actually. Bengal at that time was literally the hub of our culture. The whole Shakta tradition was so embedded in people's psyche. Literally, that whole Bengal civilization was a very powerful hub of bhakti through the Shakta tradition and knowledge. Some of the intellectual greats and the devotional greats have happened in that beautiful province of Bengal. Very systematically, not just because the British invaded through the East India Company, first in Bengal, but also because they strategically realized the value of that whole now Eastern India. Literally, if you see the kind of destruction of the people's psyche that has happened, the visual that you see over here is not a representative picture, it is an actual picture. When a person is instilled with the deepest fear of having no food and being starved to death, that is far, far more painful, leaves the pattern of fear of no food far, far more traumatic, not just for that person, for that family, for that whole civilization, because not just that generation, but the next generations will also carry that very fear. When the child in the family sees that his or her parents are not able to get a square meal, to the extent that you have those literally skeleton bodies walking around, that child also grows up with the same fear. So these created famines and riots ensured that the very fabric of the society, the very core of that civilization was destroyed by having a self-doubt on their very culture, their principles, their ideology, their lifestyle. Because it came to the fundamental question of survival, where if my religion, my ideology, my lifestyle is going to subject me to such a life of utter, not just poverty, but literally animalistic lifestyle, who will want to live that lifestyle? So the whole narrative was twisted by the British to make the Indians themselves, especially the people of Bengal, who had so much of pride and self-confidence about their culture, made them have a self-doubt, self-hatred, self-denial about that very culture which was straight away enlightenment based. As Swamiji said, he himself is a Shakta. The straight way to experiencing Paramashiva is through the Shakta tradition. Destroyed that very civilization, the faith of those people in that civilization. It continued further, whether it was Winston Churchill instigated artificial famines, derogatory comments, ensuring that food that was available and created by the Indians aplenty was not just shipped across the shores to the land of Britain, but also just dumped into the oceans. Millions of tons just dumped into the ocean to ensure that the famine exists and the people of India are not just physical slaves, but mental slaves to the British, so that it becomes an easy regime for them to continue dominating India, to continue leeching off this country, to continue enslaving us physically, mentally, psychologically, in spirit. That is the worst destruction that has ever happened to the Vedic civilization, to India, to Hinduism. Far, far more damaging than the physical destruction that has happened in the 1,000 years preceding that by the Mughals. Just in a span of 100 years, they destroyed our very identity to the extent that in today's world, we feel pride about living the Western lifestyle, when it is actually the reason why Indians all over the world are successful is actually because of the Hindu values that they have been brought up with, that they have been inculcated with. And as Swamiji said, the next generation will not have that, because they are not living the Hindu lifestyle. It is not the Indians as a community that are successful because of some individual trait. It is the very power of this civilization, of the Hindu values, literally the kind of diet that we eat, the organic sattvic lifestyle that our ancestors, our parents, grandparents have lived, and the same genes which have been transmitted to us. Literally the very power of that pony rice that grows on the banks of the Kaveri, the power of the ghee that is available to us because of our civilization which treats the cow as sacred, because of the power of Ayurveda, which gives us that kind of a Vedic mind, which enables that Vedic mind to function, the power of our yoga, which gives us this yogic body. All this put together is the successful Indian, even today, wherever he is in India or the rest of the world. When that is uprooted, when that is not lived, there is no way that there is going to be any differentiation between the Indians who are so successful in so many fields versus the other civilizations which are still struggling with not just physical problems but unexistent mental problems, be it depression or anxiety, stress, whatever. As Swamiji said, no mental problem is real. The whole Western civilization which is suffering with all this, today what is happening? In India, that problem is already entrenched in society. Depression, which was not even a word whose meaning was recognized just 2 decades back, today has become a household name. Psychiatrists never existed. Psychiatry never existed as a profession in this country. But today it is a pride to pop in tablets for beating depression, for beating anxiety, for beating peer pressure. Civilization.
Sorry to interrupt you. We will be back with the viewers in just a few moments and continue presenting the history of this Hindu Holocaust that has been happening, which is a history of humanity itself. We will be back with the viewers in just a few moments. Please stay tuned. We will be back with you in just a few moments.
Nithyananda Paramashivoham. Om 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 Nithyananda Paramashivoham.
Nithyanandam, welcome back. We were sharing about the Hindu Holocaust that has been happening across the years, decades, centuries for the Indian civilization. As we were just introspecting, in the modern world, literally the word Holocaust itself was coined after the Jewish persecution. 6 million Jews killed around the time of the Second World War, less than a century back. But if you see the Hindu persecution history, the Hindu Holocaust, those numbers, the viciousness, the consistency is staggering. I'd just like to recap what we were sharing in the last hour or so, how the Indians, the Hindus as a civilization, have been systematically destroyed, persecuted, killed, massacred, demeaned. The whole attack on their very identity, their self-confidence, the confidence on their ideology, on the civilization, on the principles, on the scriptures, everything. And touching the women folk, which is one of the most sensitive aspects of any civilization. Molesting and raping the women of that civilization. Literally destroying from its very roots the confidence of the people, inflicting huge fear psychosis into the very gut of that civilization, targeting the men by killing the men, raping the women, destroying the education system so that the children do not have our traditional Vedic Gurukul education system. You destroy all these three segments. What is left for the civilization? Practically nothing. You don't need to destroy any more. This is the sophisticated persecution that has been happening against the Hindus in the last 2000 years. Starting from the Mughals, the Mughal invaders, who were more barbaric, more open, more physically violent. At that time, probably there were not as many human rights activists. So 500 million people killed, 3 million enslaved, millions raped. There was nobody to question. Not even the history that was documented by those invading forces, by the invading Mughals, was accurate, to the extent that history itself was twisted to make them sound great. Otherwise, how does Akbar the Great get justified? Or Alexander the Great get justified? A civilization of complete violence. How does that qualify for the adjective great? But the whole history itself was distorted. One of the most significant, important things to understand for us is the way history gets distorted over not just over the ages, but at the very source, to make it twisted, because the one who wins the war writes the history. Alexander wins the war, he becomes Alexander the Great. What went behind that? What was the war all about? For acquisition for land, acquisition for women, acquisition for knowledge, grabbing the knowledge. How does that qualify for a great? This has been consistently happening over the centuries, be it the Mughals or in recent times the British. In the case of the British, it was a lot more sophisticated, multi-pronged attacks by creating artificial famines so that people are starved to death. It is not a simple one moment beheading as a so-called gross murder would be, but a systematic destruction of one's own, not just body, but mind, by starving a person to death, making the other people, the rest of the society, the rest of the state have to watch that, so that they are literally drowned in that fear psychosis for generations to come. To show you some of the, let's just to give an example. Sorry for these gory visuals, but really we need to understand what our ancestors have gone through, what kind of tyaga has been done by our ancestors who fought for preserving this great Vedic civilization. To just give you a glimpse of that, in the massacres, the slavery, the rape, and the temple destruction, how even in war, the Hindus practiced dharma the right way, but these invaders literally marauded us, looted our temple wealth, robbed our temple grains, burnt our agriculture, destroyed our deities, enslaved us. Those pictures will show you a glimpse of what we have gone through. It's not easy for a person to be literally lynched like that with a pair of pliers. But this is not some representative picture. This is really what we have been subjected to. Our rishis, our munis, in the last few centuries, how they have been, see, they would have had the spiritual strength to withstand. But when that tradition, when that knowledge system, when that lifestyle is destroyed, their next generation would not only have that knowledge to fight this, but also would be just drowned in that fear psychosis. This is what we mean by multi-pronged attack. It is not just killing a person by putting him in a concentration camp or a gas chamber. With all due respect to what the Jews have gone through, what we want to point out over here is, it is not just a simple killing, not just a taking away of a life. It is destroying the very mental setup, the confidence, the backbone, everything that civilization has been living, has been proud of, has been sharing with the rest of the world. To show you further, down the next slides, the beheading. See, beheading a person is one thing, but as you see in this particular slide, the invaders literally killing the babies and showing that to the parents. That is what is unforgivable. It will show you the mothers, the ladies, literally being made to sit with a garland of skulls of their own children. Imagine the plight of a lady the plight of a lady who not only witnesses her child's death, gruesome murder, but is made to wear a skull garland of her own children's heads. Some of these visuals are just nerve-wrenching, gut-wrenching. As I was telling, to destroy a civilization, it requires the most uncivilized way, the most gruesome way, the most unforgivable, literally anti-human way is to touch its women folk, to the extent that the women actually started a practice called sati or jauhar when the Mughals invaded, and that practice today, we can say it was such a demeaning practice. Hindus themselves derided our ancestors for having started such a practice, saying that it was so inhuman, not for women's rights. But have we bothered to see why our women folk, our ancestors, our queens had to go through such a big torture? As Swamiji was sharing, the worst way, the most painful of any pain inflicted on the body is by the pain inflicted by a burn. We can imagine if you just a tip of your finger gets burnt while, say, lighting a match or accidentally on a candle, you know the kind of pain the stinging pain, the persistent pain that you go through. Imagine what kind of a desperate situation it would have been for our queens, for our women, to have to race to the funeral pyre of their husband and be burnt alive. It's impossible to even imagine this. All of us who have done, by the grace of Paramashiva, all of us who have done fire walking, right? When Bhagwan walks those coal embers, and when we follow just looking into him, into his third eye, and when he gives us that inspiration, that is a totally different thing. But so many of us who would have had those small, those embers making some small burn wounds, don't we know what that pain is? Because of Swamiji's grace, the pain would not have been felt. But the same stretch of fire, the 40 feet length of fire walking, if you had to do with no Bhagwan's compassion and grace and support and spiritual strength, what would that have been? Just to give an example, just to give a kind of a comparison of what that kind of pain is. Anybody who has experienced a small burn will know what it means, what that pain means. God forbid if any of us have had to have a family member or someone close to us having been subjected to a fire accident. You know what it means when you see that person in immense pain, because the skin, which is the largest tissue on the body, is completely destroyed. All those nerve endings will send those immense pain signals to the brain. The whole body is exposed, no tissue covering it. How do you think a woman will, out of her own volition, not just enter the pyre, but not run away from it? Just one burn of a candle, involuntarily, how the body flinches back. How can a woman rise to a funeral pyre of her husband and burn herself to death? It is not possible unless the person is subjected to such a deep violation that she feels that it is far better to sacrifice this body in spite of the tremendous pain that she is going through, rather than being subjected to the rape of her dead body by the invading intruders. Not just physical violation when you're alive, but being physically violated even after a gruesome death. Why? To satiate the lust of those invaders and to prevent the theft of the DNA of our civilization. That is the immense amount of tyaga that our women folk, that our queens, that our ancestors have done to preserve this Vedic DNA within this community of living Hindus, rather than allow it to be pilfered, to be literally grabbed by the invaders. Had that happened, just imagine if this DNA had been allowed to be grabbed invaders with not just the raw animal instinct, but with the brain and the intelligence of the Vedic ancestors, of our Vedic civilization. This is just one aspect of the persecution that we wanted to share with you on how to just even internalize, grasp what kind of persecution they would have gone through to be able to be forced to take such a gruesome decision of burning alive. Mind you, they were not forced to be burnt alive. Nobody pushed them to the funeral pyre. They themselves took that voluntary step so that that DNA could be preserved, so that there existed no dead body of theirs, so that they are charred to death. There exists no dead body, no corpse for the invaders to have the unimaginable pleasure of raping, and on top of that grabbing our DNA. Having said this, the next phase, the phase 2 so-called of the Hindu Holocaust, we shall enter into that. I invite Ma Nithya Bhaktikananda Swami to lead us into this next phase. Thank you, Nithyanandam.
Thank you, Ma. Nithyanandam. Whatever we just saw and heard from Ma Acharananda Swami is hardly the surface of the Hindu Holocaust. It is even lesser than a bird's eye view the amount of mass destruction, massacre, and genocide that has happened at the physical level, and the amount of destruction that has happened at the knowledge level, at the scriptural level, where our scriptures have been stolen, burnt, where our universities, the knowledge transmission system has been burnt. The amount of destruction that has happened at the level of the psyche of the people, and the amount of destruction that has happened in the level of consciousness itself. The consciousness of not just India as a nation, but the consciousness of the entire humanity, which was receiving the science of enlightenment from the Hindu incarnations and gurus who hailed from India, was corrupted. The consciousness was destroyed. And that is when we started degrading from superconscious beings like our great rishis, the sages of ancient India, of Kailasa, that existed at that point in time before the persecution, Hindu Holocaust started. We degraded to normal, not normal, to abnormal human beings living off just binary logic and intellect. The reason why we're dwelling upon the Hindu Holocaust today is only the Hindu solutions teaches the cosmic principles, and it has proven itself across the entire planet. When we once upon a time existed as 56 nations, an enlightened civilization itself, people living in bliss and achieving extraordinarily in every field we can conceive of, be it astrology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, mathematics, the aspirations that we all have today to excel in something or the other in our life is actually nothing compared to the aspirations our Kailasa had. They excelled simply because their consciousness was of such high frequency, because they were living the lifestyle of Kailasa, which is why again and again we need to understand Hinduism is not a religion. It is the ultimate lifestyle to live, especially when you're born human. It belongs to the whole world. It belongs to each one in this world. And when that gets destroyed, when the gurus and incarnations who are teaching those truths get destroyed, when they get killed, when their mission gets destroyed, it is the loss of the whole world of humanity, which is the only reason why the incarnations never give up in spite of the persecution meted out to them, because theirs is too noble and too divine a cause and too global. And the material they're made up of, which is sheer divinity, the material of Paramashiva himself, because it is the cosmos, the Paramashiva, that takes the human form and comes down as the incarnation. Because of that single reason, the material they are made up of, they don't even know to shrink back when humanity strikes. And therefore, throughout, although the history of humanity has been persecution of the Hindu gurus and executing the Hindu Holocaust from the side of the incarnations and gurus and sannyasis and sadhus, it has always been continue to give the Hindu solutions to the world, which is what is meeting our eye even today in the life of the current living incarnation of Bhagavan, His Divine Holiness, Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam. Amidst the over 100 plus assassination attempts and having forced to leave his home and stay away from human society and continue to give the Hindu truths. Despite the persecution and assassination attempts on his life and destruction of the global mission he established, and how he is continuing to rebuild it, and he has successfully established the Kailasa, the only Hindu nation today. On the one side, humanity is too fortunate to have this from the side of their gurus and incarnations, but too unfortunate that we are continuing to do what we're doing instead of waking up. We are now going to continue to see the history of the Hindu Holocaust in its other gory dimensions. It was part of the planned destruction of the civilization that was given birth, the enlightened civilization that prevailed due to the Hindu solutions, that the artificial famines were made, which were made to look as though they were real famines. Today, we just have this one sample example where 2 sadhus were brutally murdered. But the narratives, for those who have not seen the video, how they were brutally murdered, the narratives would be what they would believe, which is they were child thieves who were beaten to death by villagers. Just this one sample is enough for us to apply as an understanding over this entire Hindu Holocaust history that we are now understanding now. Famines were man-made, but made to believe as though they were real famines. You are now seeing in front of you 200 million Hindus were killed in several man-made famines. Hindu temples had a unique system of having grain banks where they would store grains. The temple structures are not just places of worship. They serve the purpose of grain banks where they would provide grains to society in times of crisis. And they were actually centers of learning. They were universities by themselves. And thirdly, they were where actually congregation happened and people came together and learned the Hindu truth. So they were universities in their own right. And thirdly, they were places of congregation where the powerful spiritual and religious practices were performed to spread the energy of the superconscious energy to people and to give them the deeper understanding and experience of these powerful rituals, practices of spirituality and religion. They were multi-purpose, multi-dimensional gifts from Hindu Dharma for the sake of humanity. And part of their purpose was to store the grain banks which would provide the grains to society in times of crisis. With the destruction of the temples, these grain banks were destroyed and the Hindu civilization was pushed to food crisis. That was how the artificial famine was created. Even the modern economic and technological process has not been able to end this food crisis till now. Because what started off as an artificially made famine, we have not been able to make up for it or wake up from the truth behind it. Because by then, the consequences of that artificially made famine became huge. And people had to struggle with so many other things in their life because of that. And parallelly, the persecutors, the executors of the Hindu Holocaust were striking in all the other dimensions, like how you just heard. And therefore, life became survival mode. And the truths went down the drain. The lifestyle degraded. And what you're seeing in front of you literally became the beginning of the human beings that would follow after this, as we exist today, where literally even the human form has shrunk. In the times of Meenakshi, it is said, it has been shown and proven that human beings were 8 feet tall, built so healthily and so powerfully. During the course of the Hindu Holocaust, even the physical forms of the human being shrunk because of the physical, mental, spiritual, psychological impact of the persecution. And human cognition started shrinking. And from these years of famine, the human beings that developed, even physically, became much shrunken in form. And today, a 6-footer is considered really tall by today's standards. And we don't even know that we had a history where human beings were 8 feet tall. Goddess Meenakshi herself was 8 feet tall, a towering personality. We need to connect, we need to understand very deeply the impact of the Hindu Holocaust on the life of you and me. It is just not something that happened to a sect of people who existed at that point in time. The effects of the Hindu Holocaust is existent in today's life and lifestyle where you and me are involved. As we move on further in this presentation, let us see the statistics of famines, the artificially created brutal famines, just between 1100 and 1600. 11 famines were created, 10 million starved to death, and 1700 to 1950. During the colonial era of India, 80 million was starved to death. And from 1100 to 1700, during the Mughal era, 18 million was starved to death. And from 1783 to 84, what they call the Kailasa famine, they gave fancy names to make it sound very global and very professional. No one knew that the whole thing was artificially created with brutal intentions behind it. 11 million was starved to death. 1791 to 92, called the Dojibara famine or the Skull famine, 11 million was starved to death. And during 1600 to 1800, there were 3 other famines that caused 10 million to starve to death. And 1769 to Bengal famine struck, where 10 million was starved to death. 1876 to 78, the Great Famine, the Southern India famine, 8.2 million was starved to death. 1860 to 61, the Upper Doab famine, 2 million were starved to death. At least today, we need to understand that none of these famines actually happened as a natural calamity or a disaster. They were all very meticulously planned, very meticulously executed, but we were made to believe that it was a natural famine. The malice that executed the Hindu Holocaust needs to be clearly understood so that we wake up today and be part of re-establishing what is required to save humanity. If you see next, during the Hindu Holocaust of phase 1, up to even as recent as 2003, you can see the huge dip in the GDP, how the destruction of the Hindu economy happened. No one will even guess that the roots of the destruction of the Hindu economy lies in such meticulously planned, strategized operations. The gross domestic product is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced during a specific time period. And who said that India, or wherever the Hindu civilization prevailed, was any backward in any of these areas? We were leading in these areas, and there was no reason for our GDP to decline. Only because of the systematic Hindu Holocaust, where on a 360 degree, every single dimension was destroyed and degraded, that the GDP started declining from 30% to almost 0. And if you see, during 3200 BC, 56 Hindu kingdoms existed on an area, surface area of 60 million square kilometers. It is not even imaginable. It is so difficult to even imagine the vastness, the extent of the enlightened civilization that once upon a time existed as Kailasa. Whereas by 2007 CE, there are 0 Hindu nations that exist and 0 million square kilometers on which it exists. Only today, in front of our own eyes, His Divine Holiness Bhagavan Shri Nithyananda Paramashivam, amidst the continuing Hindu Holocaust, has re-established Sri Kailaasa at the cost of his very life, blood and sweat. The only Hindu nation that stands today, from what was 60 million square kilometers and 56 nations, and a time it has come down to the only Hindu nation that has been formed today. And we've had a period from the year 2000 till date where there were 0 Hindu nations and not even 1 square kilometer where the Hindu civilization existed as a nation. Going forward, from 1700 CE to 1950 CE, the colonial invaders destroy the Gurukul Hindu education system. The Gurukul Hindu education system is a pure knowledge transmission system where the cosmic principles, which are the principles of Hindu Dharma, are taught during the formative years of the children. Because only when you grow up with the Hindu solutions, with the ultimate knowledge on how to live with cosmic principles, how to live in oneness, how to coexist, how to live with superconscious frequency, only then when they grow up and when they become decision makers, when they become the rulers, when they enter into every single professional field, be it agriculture or the priesthood or scientists or you name it, artists, in every field, the superconscious frequency will continue to prevail, and therefore the quality of any contribution of these human beings will be kept at that pitch and level, which will benefit all of humanity. Understand, when we talk cosmic principles, it is obviously catering to the entire humanity. So when the colonial invaders destroyed the Gurukul knowledge transmission system, where all of this was taught, where the seeds were sown, and when it is a knowledge transmission system where the very individuals were produced as superconscious beings, when that was destroyed, the next generation of Hindus were made oblivious to their true history. The colonial history books taught a distorted false history and introduced the Hindus to themselves as savage barbarians, as an underdeveloped country, who were educated and liberated by the invaders. A complete 180-degree shift. The history was made to stand upside down, where the enlightened civilization was taught to the next generation as savage barbarians who were educated by and liberated by the invaders. Whereas the truth is, they were a superconscious community who gave the highest contributions to society that stand even today as the scientific contributions in any field you take it, even if in the field of aviation, and they were actually destroyed by the invaders. Whereas the narrative is, they were savage, underdeveloped barbarians who were educated and liberated by the invaders. And it was done to make the next generation loyal to the colonial subjects. Next, as we move further into the Hindu Holocaust history, the destruction of the Gurukul education system, the knowledge transmission system, if you see, from 5000 to 1900 CE, 10,000 Pitams, which were the great seats of learning, the universities, the mutts, the matas, the agraharams, where the priests lived together, they were destroyed. 10,000 of them were destroyed. And from 1800 to 1900 CE, 10 lakh Gurukuls, the Hindu knowledge transmission schools, were destroyed. And from 1950 till date, the false history and anti-Hindu narratives have hijacked the education and made it the modern education as we know it, which gives us only the binary logic and does not allow us to even remember that we existed once upon a time in multidimensional cosmic logic. And if you see earlier, even until 1823, when the colonial government were just starting to execute their part of the Hindu Holocaust, the education, the Gurukul Hindu education, offered it completely free to all communities equally in the society. Whereas the colonial government destroyed the free education and replaced it with what we know today, where several sections of the society could not afford what they were giving. And therefore, they successfully created inequality in society. As long as the Hindu solutions and Hindu laws were prevalent, there was never inequality in society. Therefore, there was never any violence between any sections of society. In fact, if you see the next flash in front of you, the Gurukul education system encouraged respect among all communities, equality and respect, because that was the truth. No one's higher or lower. All communities were equal and all communities had unique responsibilities which they were executing. That is the basis of the Hindu truths. Whereas the colonial government created inequality amongst the communities through force, by offering the very education system, which is one of the survival needs, in a way where some communities could not afford it and some communities could. And therefore, the whole inequality in the society happened, and riot and violence started happening between the different sections of society. Whereas the truth is, the way we existed in those days, in accordance with the Hindu Shastras, we lived our life. What you're seeing, the Sanskrit verse in front of you, it says, it is the second verse from a treatise on agriculture written by the great Rishi Parashara in 3300 BCE. He says, in spite of being learnt of 4 Vedas, if a priest considers agriculture inferior, he is bound to be stuck in cycle of poverty. Look at the way in which they're even giving it as a warning. If ever a priest who is proficient in the 4 Vedas considers agriculture to be any inferior to him, then he will be stuck in the cycle of poverty. This is not only giving us the great truth of inequality of all communities, it is literally a warning which they have given us then itself. What will happen if you move away from this truth? And that is exactly what is happening to us today. That is exactly what is happening to us. And the persecutors, the executors of the Hindu Holocaust, studied our Hindu Shastras, studied our lifestyle, and deciphered from where we were able to successfully maintain such equalities, and brought the wedge of division exactly there. And they were successful in it. And they created violence and fights amongst the different sections of society so that they could remain the central power, as though making peace between the different sections of community. Unlike the modern era, even in 10,000 years of Hindu history, there is not one shred of evidence of community-based violence that we face today. As you can see in front of your eyes, our Shastras have laid down the way to live, and we lived and we were successful. There was no communal violence. Whereas the part of the Hindu Holocaust, persecution of the Hindu principles, is what created the community-based violence. The colonial empire applied the divide and rule strategy. The moment they divided education for different sections and made it impossible for certain sections to receive, they successfully created the communal violence, which was their very intention also. They applied the divide and rule strategy and destroyed this harmony between the communities and poisoned the communities against each other. And they created the caste supremacy. And between 1830 to 1950, after successfully destroying the Gurukul knowledge transmission system, the colonial ruler systematically applied the divide and rule strategy, and the Hindu principles of peaceful coexistence, the dharma that we have been hearing Bhagavan tell us in the past few days of Satsang, where he said the Hindu dharma is the solution for the karma that we have been creating through our lifestyle. The Hindu principles of peaceful coexistence was replaced by false racist identification. A false history was created, erasing all the Hindu history that existed before that, between 0 CE. And false narratives were used to constantly poison the communities against each other. All this resulted in the creation of the caste supremacists and the anti-Hindu atheists, who started emerging as the power forces, and they completely destroyed the peaceful, harmonious Hindu society. And then from 1950 to present, step by step, the anti-Hindu atheists became more and more powerful, because by then the human beings who even knew a little of the past of Hindu history before the Holocaust started getting executed died, and the modern day history books were successfully rewritten. So even what the modern generation was learning as Hindu history was not the actual Hindu history. It was the false narratives of the anti-Hindu elements. So they knew what the original. By then they were already engaged in all their fights successfully created by the Hindu Holocaust. And therefore, these two emerging powers, the anti-Hindu elements, the atheist elements, started showing themselves as being engaged in making peace and controlling and started ruling the whole show. And this is the current situation we are in, where if we don't touch base back with the life that we had earlier, which is the way for the entire world, then these forces are going to continue to destroy us, which is why the clarion call from the great Hindu incarnations, from our beloved Bhagavan, where he can't tell us more than this, how we are destroying our own lives. If you see here in front of you, by the 1970s, in parts of southern India, the hate speech and the hate propaganda against the Hinduism became a fashion. For example, even in a Hindu majority country, anti-Hindu leaders made statements such as, if you see a Hindu priest, a Brahmin, and a snake, kill the Hindu priest first. And it was acceptable to society, such a statement. So understand the huge crisis that is happening. And here you're seeing in front of you, which I cannot even read out, the banner you're seeing. The anti-Hindu education system that was inherited from the colonial era was further hijacked by anti-Hindu atheists. And relentless generation after generation influence of these false anti-Hindu history, anti-Hindu education and narratives created a civilization that we are living in today, where even Hindus were made to hate themselves. Hindus did not know the history, nor had the confidence, and they were too busy in the lifestyle that was being created by these persecutory forces. And looking down upon the Hindu virtues, lifestyle, incarnations, principles became a fashion. And if you see our immediate Hindu incarnations and gurus who lived in recent modern history, in the 1800s, the great Hindu enlightened masters such as Paramahamsa Yogananda took Hinduism to the West, but the anti-Hindu racists labeled him as love cult. And even after his death, false cases of paternity were filed on him to destroy his organization, so that even his teachings would be discarded by the people. And only in 2002, 50 years after his death, the case could close conclusively, establishing the falsity of the paternity claims. But what use is it? All the people who lived when the case was going on were misled to believe that Paramahamsa Yogananda was a dangerous love cult. He came under the disguise of a love cult, and he was a person to be steered clear from. So they successfully destroyed the lives of the Hindus who lived at that point in time when he was alive in the body, available. Exactly what is happening to Bhagavan when he's alive in the body today. We have to wake up and see the parallels in the Hindu Holocaust and see the whole thread running even today. Only then we will wake up. What is the use in Paramahamsa Yogananda's false case closing 50 years later? For those 50 years, the hope of humanity was destroyed. The possibility for humanity to raise their consciousness once again through Paramahamsa Yogananda was destroyed. And if you see, in the 1900s, the Hindu sages such as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and the great HDH Srila Prabhupada Swamiji, who expanded Hinduism in the West, were labeled as cults by the anti-Hindu racists. And from the 1800s, if you see, right up to 2000, the Hindu enlightened masters, incarnations and gurus kept working despite all of this persecution relentlessly to revive, spread and keep Hinduism alive. And for this reason, the Hindu gurus are continuously subject to attacks, persecution and assassination. Coming to the most recent of our times, if you see in front of you here, on the 30th of April, 1982, in broad daylight, understand how the courage has been built to attack Hinduism. In broad daylight, 16 male and 1 female sannyasis were pulled out of a taxi, burnt alive and killed. In 4 decades, in spite of more than 300 million Indian rupees spent on various court trials and tribulations to date, no justice has been got. And if you see, in the case of Sri Jayendra Saraswati Swamigal of the great Kanchi Mutt, who has only served humanity like you can never explain or describe. Its own pontiff, Swami Jayendra Saraswati, was acquitted of a false murder case in 2004. The false murder charges against him, if you see the way it was covered at the time he was slapped with the false charges versus the way it was covered by the mass media cult at the time when the news of his acquittal came years later, if you see in front of you, the defamation coverage is approximately 356 hours in a particular television versus 3 minutes news of his acquittal. And the second channel, 344 hours of defamation coverage against Jayendra Saraswati, speaking out his false, of course they will not say false, his murder case versus when he was relieved of the false charges, they covered it for 1 minute. And in the third channel, 280 hours were aired talking about the murder charges against Jayendra Saraswati, whereas when he was acquitted of the murder charge, only 3 minutes was covered. And in another channel, 325 hours was injected as poison into the public through describing him holding murder charges as a murderer, whereas 0 minute was aired when he was acquitted. And on the next channel, 450 hours were aired when Jayendra Saraswati was slapped with the murder charges, whereas when he was acquitted, 0 minutes were aired. And in yet another channel, 260 hours were aired when he was slapped with the false murder charges, whereas only 1 minute was aired when he was acquitted of the murder charges. I don't think we need more evidence than this to understand the need of the hour to wake up to the history of Hindu Holocaust, because it is not the history of Hindu Holocaust alone, it is the history of persecution of humanity itself. I now invite our sannyasi, Nithya Jayananda, to of this Hindu Holocaust. As we heard Bhagwan just 2 days ago, how he vividly explained to us that in the entertainment industry, how the Hindu gurus and incarnations have always been shown as villains or comedians, so that through the entertainment industry, which has its maximum impact on people today, they will be able to inject the anti-Hindu narrative. You will now hear through the next presentation about this dimension of the Hindu Holocaust. Nithyanandamma.
Nithyanandamma. So, like Ma Bhaktika Swami was mentioning, another very, very important aspect, important phase of the Hindu Holocaust, which often, very often goes unnoticed, is the persecution, the attack that happens through print media, through social media, through news, and most importantly, the entertainment industry. Fortunately or unfortunately, over 40% of the Indian population, which falls under the middle class community, is highly influenced by the entertainment industry, by the cinema, by the serials, by the TV programs. It's highly influenced. You can see how the crowd actually gather, flock around every movie that is released, and knowing very clearly the impact and the influence that these movies, these cinemas, the entertainment industry has over the people, especially over the youth of our country. It is very, very cunningly, very, very strategically misused to insert the poison into all our minds about Hindus, about Hindu leaders and Hindu gurus very, very specifically. If you just Google up and look at large all the villains of the Indian cinema, you will very, very clearly see they are 90% of the time depicted with clear Hindu symbols, and every time less than 1% of the heroes will have any symbol of Hinduism on them. As you can see the pictures, very, very evidently, the huge tilak which is placed on their forehead, the kind of worship they do, everything, the way they are projected as Hindus. And so unconsciously, all of us are taught and made to believe that Hinduism, that Hindu leaders, Hindu gurus are violent, are criminals. Continuous brainwashing, unconsciously, nothing is told to us directly. But very, very subtly, these ideas are inserted into us. On one side, showing them as villains, if not, otherwise they're comedians. We have seen hundreds of examples where sadhus, Hindu sannyasis are used, Hindu characters are used as comedians in so many movies, so many cinemas. And let me be very frank, even me back then, as a student, back in school, would go and watch these movies and not even realize that these are directly questioning my own tradition in which I'm born into, my own tradition which has benefited me so much. It is so accepted by everybody because we don't realize the poison that is being fed into us. Like Machala Swami and Ma Bhaktika Swami was mentioning before, the whole Holocaust history has been very, very clearly hidden from all of us. We don't even realize what our ancestors have gone through. We've become so insensitive to it that in front of our very own eyes, when we see the Hindu leaders, Hindu gurus, Hindu symbols being abused, we don't even realize it. To be very frank, I want to share one of the incidents from my own life. When back in school, I remember today, before coming to share, I was just trying to go back and calculate and understand the situation where I can very clearly now state that less than 3% of my whole school, my school that I went to was a Hindu school. The principal, the administrators, the teachers, most of them were Hindus. Most of the students were Hindus. But of course, we claim to be a secular school. And what do we mean by secular? We're supposed to be open to all religions and traditions. But no, if I would wear the kumkum and go to school, my PT teacher would catch me and say, I'm supposed to remove it. I'm supposed to rub it off. If I would wear the bindi and go, all my friends would make fun of me. Only because I had Swamiji who gave me the context as to why I'm supposed to be doing it, I had the courage and I continued to do it and not fall into an inferiority complex or feel ashamed of myself. But what Swamiji is telling us that the next generation is not even going to be Hindu, they're going to be ashamed of us. Let me tell you, it has already started. This silent, very, very subtle persecution continues till date. We do not realize, but all the media, all the print media, news media, everything is funded by the anti-Hindu, anti-social elements, very, very consciously planning to defame and destroy Hinduism. Another instance that I would like to state that will very, very clearly tell us the truth behind the statement that I'm making. I remember in a conversation I was having with one of the other devotees in our Sangha, one of the other disciples of Swamiji, who was invited for an interview on a news channel during when Swamiji's persecution was had just begun, and so much of defamatory material was being circulated in the media. So in that time, one of the disciples was called on for an interview. She went and she attended the interview, and interview in the sense it was a debate, a discussion on the news channel. And after the interview, after the discussion was over, off screen, when that disciple was speaking to the news reporter, the person who conducted the interview, she asked him, so today you seemed, quite unbiased. You let me say what I wanted, but I have seen that you yourself, in a previous show, ran a very, very defamatory, a very, very abusive show on Swamiji. Why did you do that? And he says, I don't know, fortunately, I don't know to say unfortunately, or should I sympathize with him? I do not know what. And he says, I had to do it to feed my family. I had to do it to feed myself. Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have had my pay. It was my instructions. My boss told me that I had to run such a show. So either all of us are in these two buckets. We are brainwashed by the entertainment industry, by our society, and made to believe that Hinduism is backward, promotes violence, that Hindu leaders and gurus are criminals. Or we are on the other side, where maybe because of our family and our values, we do believe that yes, Hinduism is good, I want to follow Hinduism, I want to go to the temple. But the whole system of the society, the influences of the society, those who are ruling us, our politicians, whom we work for, we are forced to work as per them. So unless, like Swamiji has said, unless for 3 sadhus who have been murdered, unless 3,000 of us stand against this whole system and take up Apat Sannyas and live this lifestyle of Hinduism, there is no way that we can cope up, that we can make up for the huge amount of persecution that is happening to us. It is high time we open our eyes and see that we ourselves are being poisoned. We don't even know that we are being poisoned. It is not now necessary that we are brutally murdered. Of course, we are saying that also is happening at one end. But don't just think because nobody is holding a knife at your neck that you are not a victim of the persecution. You very much are. Continuously, if we are made to believe wrong ideas, we're being misled, led away from Hinduism. So you are never going to apply the Hindu truths, the Hindu solutions in your life. You are going to be made victim to the pharmaceutical industries, to the food industry, and you are in the vicious cycle that they want you to be in. It is high time we stand up, we wake up and see through these strategies which are only here to destroy us. If we do not wake up now, like Swamiji said, the next generation will not even remain Hindu, will not even be Hindus. In fact, they will be ashamed of us. I would like to lead it back to Bhaktika Swami to lead us into various other aspects, various other insights on the Hindu persecution, so we can understand at least now and wake up and take action against it.
Yes, ma'am. Through the entertainment industry, we saw the subtle scheming ways in which the attention is captured and the anti-Hindu narratives are inserted. Today, we all know that the entertainment industry is a huge time pass around the world, and building the anti-Hindu narratives into the entertainment industry is one of the lethal weapons of the anti-Hindu elements. And we consume it because every time we are watching the cinema or the television, we are literally in a subconscious state where we don't even know what we're consuming. We are most likely having our food and looking at it, where it straight enters our system and settles inside it even before our logic can stand up to analyze whether it is right or wrong. Our lifestyle has become such. It is an unconscious lifestyle. So this, combined with the continuous feeding from the entertainment industry, adds up where you are unconsciously living, and therefore what is being shown, the anti-Hindu narratives, in the form of the very heroes and villains and comedians, straight away get engraved in you even before you exercise your wisdom on it, your clarity on it. So it is one of the most dangerous ways in which the Hindu Holocaust has been happening, where we don't even have a clue that it is being done to us. And before we move further to the next segment, I want to bring to your attention when we are talking about the knowledge transmission system, the universities, the knowledge transmission universities that existed when Kailasa existed and when we existed as an enlightened civilization across the whole planet, the caliber, the vastness, the volume of the university and the knowledge in them cannot even be imagined today. You are seeing in front of you now just a handful of universities, which are among the more than 10,000 such universities that were destroyed as part of the Hindu Holocaust. The Ratnagiri University, the Vikramashila University, the Jagadala University, the most famous Nalanda University, the Takshashila University, the Vallabhi University, the Pushpagiri University, the Udantapur University, the Somapura University, the Bikrampur University. I've just mentioned the names of 10 universities, and 10,000 such universities were actually destroyed, along with all the knowledge transmission education infrastructure, which included our scriptures, the study material, the books, every single item of infrastructure you can conceive of, which was used in this great knowledge transmission system of Hindu education. And it is from these universities that the great products of Sanatana Hindu Dharma evolved, who gave all the best inventions and discoveries as we know today in all the fields that we can conceive of today, starting from astronomy to aviation to any field. And they actually set fire and burnt these universities, and what meets your eye today like a small Lego set is what remains. And it has become a tourist spot where people visit it and move even without being hit by what once upon a time existed here and what has been done to them. They don't even understand. When we visit these spots, we don't even understand that we have been robbed of the wealth of knowledge that existed in these very spots in the form of these universities, which could have made us superconscious beings today. We would have been living as superconscious beings had we graduated from these universities. Without even that knowledge or without even an idea, we visit these spots as tourist spots today. This pathetic is our state, where we don't even know the injustice, which is too small a word, that has been done to us. Because these universities were serving not just Hindus, it was serving the whole world. They were the most sought after universities, and there were 10,000 such top Hindu universities where people from all countries came and learnt the Enlightenment science and lived a superconscious life. If we don't wake up today and salvage at least what remains and prevent further persecution of the Hindu incarnations and gurus, who are the only people who can make this happen for the whole of humanity, it is not just the Hinduism, for the sake of the whole humanity, then the loss that we're going to face is literally our own life. Today, the COVID-19 is eating the life of our own families. Did we ever dream it would come to this? No. Then, before we move further into human destruction, before we see scenes that we would not even have dreamt of, we need to wake up to the need of the hour, which is waking up to the cosmic principles through the great teachings of Sanatana Hindu Dharma, which the great incarnations and Hindu gurus have been desperate to teach us, and We are fortunate that even today, amidst the history of Hindu Holocaust, the incarnations decide to come down again and again. And we have living amidst us today, the living incarnation yet again of Paramashiva, His Divine Holiness, Bhagavan Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam. We move further now into a few more awakening truths so that we don't once again discard it as something of the past or something that happened which we cannot help. Because if we decide we cannot help, then the fate is hanging out there for us. And if we discard it as a thing of the past, we are deluded because it is happening even in recent modern times, right up to just 5 days back. So let us move further. I invite Manitya Atmananda Swami to give us further awakening insights to help us understand that the Hindu Holocaust has continued into modern times and is continuing in front of our own eyes. Nithyanandam Ma.
Nithyanandam, thank you Ma Bhaktika Swami, and thank you one and all. It is not only last few days ago what had happened in Palghar. There are multiple incidents which had happened which led all of us to even think about it. It is so scary. I'm here to present few incidents which is a million. So here, if you see in the presentation, on 23rd December 1926, Swami Shraddhananda, he is one of the most popular sannyasi, a 70-year-old Swami Shraddhananda, assassinated by a mob lynch of other religion. He was an Indian educationalist who taught the Hindu solutions and established the famous Gurukul Kangri University. He was very, very brutally mob lynched and beaten to death. And another incident which had happened in Gopastami Hindu massacre. If you see in 1966, this particular incident had happened, which is an Hindu organization agitated to demand a ban on the slaughter of cows in India, as enshrined in Art of 48 of Destructive Principles of State Police in the Constitution of India, among others. The Shankaracharya fasted for the cause, the agitation of culmination in a massive destruction outside Sansad Bhavan in New Delhi on 7th November 1966. This is one incident which shaken the gut of Hindus, and there is another attack which is on 1982, attack on a sannyasi in Anand Marg, where 60 males and one female sannyasi of Hindu Sannyas order of Anand Marg were pulled out of the cab and burnt alive near a bridge in a broad daylight. More than 30 crore was spent by government on various court trials and tribunals. The end result is no justice. At another incident, Swami Lakshmanananda Saraswati, who was murdered brutally on 23rd August 2008, Swami Lakshmanananda Saraswati and 4 of his disciples were brutally murdered. He was a Hindu monk and a highly revered of Kandhamal. And these are the recent crimes against our Hindu which is very much justified. There's one more recent incident in 2007 in Dinakaran office by mob lynching. In this, 3 people were killed by burned alive. The atheist group's Tamil Daily Dinakaran's office is referred here. The court has also directed the state government to pay 5 lakhs each to the families of the 3 employees of the newspaper. How this 5 lakhs can give a life? First, infusing the negativity within us and then letting them to death and then paying some money. How it can be justified? Recently in 2002 Gujarat riots, most of us knows how horrible the Gujarat riots were happened. In this particular Gujarat riots, 1,044 were killed and 2,203 people were missing. Still, we don't know where they are, whether they are alive or not, no clue. In 1990, ethnic cleansing of minority Kashmiri Shaivites. Now today, we don't have a group of Kashmiri Shaivites who are the one who gave the greatest truths by the enlightened education which we had, and the one who has practiced and practicing. Now the whole community is not there. 550 were killed, 1 lakh families fled the valley. Kashmiri Shaivites are ancient religious ethnic minorities known to have lived in the valley of more than 10,000 years continuously. And there is no justification. Like this, there are many incidents which we can keep talking about, we can keep quoting about how the Hindu sannyasis were attacked. We will be seeing in the further sessions. For now, let us all sit straight and be in a receptive space for our Supreme Pontiff, Bhagavan Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam, to enter and give the powerful cognitions. Let us all sit straight and chant the Mahavakya Om Nithyananda Paramashivam.